Welcome to Tips, the Townsend Institute podcast series, a show produced by the Townsend Institute at Concordia University, Irvine. This podcast shares stories of leadership, coaching, and counseling experiences that have shaped the lives and careers of our guests, who then provide tips aimed toward helping listeners grow in both their personal and professional lives. I'm Dr. John Townsend, psychologist, organizational consultant, and author of over 30 books, including the New York Times best-selling Boundaries series. I'm also the founder of the Townsend Institute, and I'm excited to introduce your podcast hosts, Dr. Ashley Andrew and Dr. Gilbert Puget.
Recorded live from the AACC conference, Dr. Townsend and Dr. Puget sit down with Institute Fellow Dr. Curt Thompson, psychiatrist, author, and consultant. Dr. Thompson has a deep understanding and experience with the best of neuroscience and psychotherapy, but also a deep love and conviction for the Bible. Listen in as he shares about how our relationships with others are an extension of God's love for us. Even in our troubles and grief, we can be the eyes, ears, and presence that others need. Sending it out to Nashville, Tennessee, John and Gilbert, let's get started.
Today, we have a very special guest on the Townsend Institute podcast series. We have Dr. Curt Thompson, and we have Dr. John Townsend sitting in, and our friend Ashley Andrew is not here today. But Curt, thank you so much for taking some time to be here and to be a part of this. We know you're a Townsend Institute Fellow. So again, thank you for being part of this, and we're excited to interview you today.
Gilbert, thanks so much. It's a pleasure. Always a joy to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I think first let's start with the immediate, Curt. We're at the American Association of Christian Counselors World Conference. You and I come here regularly. There are probably 7,000 people here, and you've been a big part of this. What's your experience like here in Nashville as we speak? How's it been for you?
Well, so far, there have been a lot of people. And
it's perceptiveness that always gets me.
And there are a lot of people. And I think one thing I'm noticing is that it's a good thing that there are so many people who are eager and interested in what the AACC has to offer. I mean, when people ask me what is this thing that you're going to, I said, a significant part of what happens here is I think really world-class training for clinicians. And I did a workshop yesterday, and I've got a couple more to go. And I'm just really always struck by the hunger, the sincerity of people who really want to do good work, who want to work with integrity, and who knew that there were that many of them who were out there who were really wanting to do that. So in that sense, it's really great. And my wife is here with me this time around, so it's that much more. My daughter lives in Nashville, so we're going to visit with her on the weekend, so it's all great.
Yeah, to your point about their hunger, it seems like this is kind of there are other places like this and other associations, but this is the one where you really do get the names you've been reading. The people that I read are here, like yourself and others, and so you kind of get a rich kind of mother lode all in one place.
Yeah, you do. And I mean, it's all in one place. It can be a bit overwhelming. Not least which just being the sheer number of people. And at times when there are so many options for choice.
The menu.
The menu can be like, goodness, there are just lots of really fine meals on this menu. I'm not really quite sure how I'm going to work through that. I think the other thing too that I notice is it's clearly a place where people come to connect with people they haven't seen in a while. I mean, this is a significant part of my commitment to this meeting is my personal commitment to people like you and Linda Mintle and others who are really themselves committed to caring for patients well and also really concerned about good training for other clinicians. Yeah.
So, Curt, you have a few years of experience being a psychiatrist, right? And a speaker, an author, in your research and things. What are you most excited about?
Well, I think I would have to say that this has been a crescendoing point of focus over the last 4 or 5 years. Our practice, and now a little nonprofit that I have off to the side, is doing work to develop these confessional communities. Which is, we like to say, it's a formational community grounded in a Christian anthropology that accesses and informed by interpersonal neurobiology and runs through the lens of psychotherapy, of group psychotherapy dynamics.
I've read about this when I read your
Yeah.
books. Could you say that again? Because that was the best kind of description that I've heard.
So we would say that what we're able to do in a psychotherapeutic relationship is geometrically enhanced in the context of a group, in the context of a community. And because we are people of faith who are thinking about this, we think about these communities not just as ways to reduce people's symptoms. They're not just trying to cure their depression. We're really talking about formation. They're questions of who are people becoming, not just what are the diseases we're trying to cure, because we don't really believe that people are diseases or diagnoses waiting for a cure. We're really these images of God. We are image bearers that are destined to create beauty and goodness in the world. So what are we becoming? They are formational processes in the context of a community that is grounded in a Christian anthropology. How do we understand the nature of what it means to be human? That lives by the engagement of interpersonal neurobiology. So we pay a lot of attention to how interpersonal neurobiology informs the processes that are taking place in these group psychotherapy engagements. And then group psychotherapy dynamics play a huge role in instructing and informing what we're paying attention to at any given moment. And what I would say that I think that we find is that those patients who are doing well in individual psychotherapy, their pace and depth of transformation in a context of a group far outpaces that of what they're doing in individual work. It's not to suggest that one is better than the other. It's just to suggest that when people are willing to take the work that they're doing and put it in the context of a community, it actually is enabling them to do the things that the brain was really most efficiently made to do. And I'm really excited about the work that we continue to do now to develop this not just for individual patients, but the work that we're doing to develop a training model for other clinicians to be able to put this to use as well.
So this really accelerates their growth. It sounds like in the work they're doing through this the confessional communities.
Yeah, and I think I would probably want to be careful about the use of the word accelerate, and because I think that we live in a world in which trying to get things done quickly is part of what we're about. And if you look at the biblical narrative, there's very little, if anything, that God could have said, "Let there be the earth and all of its inhabitants and plant it," and so forth. But he took 6 days to do it.
It's an oven, not a microwave.
Right, exactly. And that is the same for our transformation. And, one of the ways that, how many people come into your office and say, well, how long is this going to take?
Which is kind of the wrong question.
Right, and we would like to say as long as it takes. That's how long it's going to take. And our longing to be transformed, often, the more urgently we feel it, the more desperate we are for this to happen quickly.
What would be cool at this point now, because I think you laid out the construct so well, is walk us through a meeting. What happens that will be different than your conventional Maslowian, your conventional Yalom process group. I think the lights would come on.
So these are groups that are grounded in, they're held in this crucible of a Christian way of understanding what it means to be human. That holds it. And it's informed by the principles of interpersonal neurobiology. And it is processed through the dynamics of group psychotherapy, dynamism. And what that can then lead to are changes that we typically don't see in individual psychotherapy work. Because there are so many more, what I like to talk about being the relational mass effect of the physics of being in a community.
As opposed to individual.
Right. And again, it's not so much one is better or worse, it's more a matter of what can we do to enhance the depth of change And when we say pace, maybe not so much about how we can accelerate it, as much as how able we are to make the changes more durable. In some respects, it's like if I'm, the larger the mass that I have that I'm using to push something, the more easily I can push that object. And that's not unlike what happens when a person...
That's momentum.
Right, and so when a person sits with you, and they sense you're being empathic with them, that's one thing. When they sit in a room with 7 other people who are being empathic with them, that literally has a different impact neurobiologically for them. And it also means that with practice over time, I now, we can always say, well, John, of course you're being kind to me because I'm paying you to be kind to me. When I have 7 other people in the room who nobody's paying, but who are willingly being present with me, that gives me an opportunity to be seen, soothed, safe, and secure at multiple different levels from other people's stories who are able to collaboratively touch my story. The other thing that these groups do that individual therapy really doesn't ever do is that it gives each participant the opportunity to actually be an agent of healing themselves in the lives of other people. And one of the things that we often miss out on, this is what Carl Menninger was asked, when somebody's that you're taking care of is depressed, what's the first thing that you have them do? And he said, I have them leave their house, lock their door, go find someone else that's less fortunate than they are and see what you can do to be helpful for them. Giving yourself away to someone else. And when someone is in the space where the telling of my story, vulnerably, brings about change in other people, that's a category of experience for which I have no practice. When I tell people, look, I want you to come and be part of this group, because of what I think the group can be for you, but also because of what I think you can be for the group. But I need you to know it's not because of your wit and your wisdom that you will be helpful. You will be helpful for the group because of your vulnerability. And of course, initially, this doesn't make any sense to people. Like, how is that helpful? Until, in the sharing of their story in vulnerability, they start to witness other people in the room whose own grief has been accessed and comes into the room, and those people now start to articulate how their lives are being transformed because of the vulnerable way in which you have just shared your story. It is, in many respects, a game-changing posture that reflects Good Friday, in the sense that we are healed by someone who's being vulnerable.
When you have a group like this, an observer saw a regular, well-done process group, which you and I have been trained in, and then you see a session with the collective community, confessional community. How would the observer experience it different?
Well, I think one of the things that the observer would see that's different is that, and especially when it comes to this notion that it's a Christian anthropology that governs this, we would say that most of the actual process itself, pausing to pay attention to what's happening in the room, being curious about what's taking place between people in the here and now, all that is primary group psychotherapy principles.
Establishing trust, establishing framework.
All those things. Where we really believe that it gets set apart is when we begin these groups. We establish and invite people to pay increasingly more and more attention to the reality that if it's true what Jesus says, that where 2 or more of you are gathered in the room, I'm going to be there and I'm going to be at work, then part of the work that we're doing is actually paying attention to how the things that we are saying and doing are the body, the voice, the ears of Jesus.
Yeah, the process itself is incarnational.
Exactly. And so there will be moments, when as I tell people, you read Colossians 3 and we read that Paul says, well, and so your life, you have died and your life is hidden with Christ in God. It's beautiful language, and I have no idea what he's talking about. Right? If you just show this to me, like, I don't know what this means, despite the fact that it's beautiful language. When you're in a group in which increasingly people are aware that when they leave the group, they're taking people with them. and they find that they are taking up residence in somebody else's life. Someone comes back in and says, Gilbert, I just want to let you know, I was standing in my boss's office having the hardest conversation I've ever had in my life, and you and John were in the room, and I saw exactly where you were standing.
Yeah.
When they say that, we say, oh, this is Paul saying that your life is hidden with Christ, because this is what this means in real time. This is not just metaphor. This is not just flowery allegory. This is real, embodied, material world reality, for which this now becomes a practice in which when they then go home and they get Colossians out and they start to read this, they begin to imagine that Jesus is no longer just some kind of abstraction. That it's real, that the body of Jesus is really something that's happening, that's transforming my life in real time and space.
And it would have been hard for them to be able to appraise that without having the experience.
Exactly.
Which enlightened.
That's exactly. You can preach this from a pulpit all day long, and it will have very little impact. But as we like to say, until we feel something in our chest, it is not yet ultimately true for us. And yet when we do have this experience in embodied ways, and we then reflect back and say, oh, this is what we read about in Genesis. It isn't just a matter of connecting dots. It is a matter of people recognizing that this is the Holy Spirit revealing the work of the Holy Spirit. And so we go to look for this in other parts of our lives outside of this group as well.
Now, Gilbert and I were really moved by your newest book, Deepest Place. It just had things about the human existential part of suffering that nobody really understands, and you've done such a clear work on that. Is it? I don't know if it's public, if it's out now.
Yeah, it is. It's around the corner.
Okay, it's around the corner because I
It's
knew
in
it
my
was.
bag. I got it in my bag right
so
now. Yeah.
we just love it.
Yeah,
Could you speak to that? Where it came from and what it's about?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would want to say is I think I wrote the book in response to the works I've done. There's been a certain progression to them, and in the last book, exploring this notion of beauty and how that is trying to speak to it as a response to shame and to trauma. And then one of the things, though, that we discover is that even when we're going to do that good work, that people are still going to suffer. And that suffering, that the work that we do does not eliminate suffering. And then on top of this, I remember one moment in one of these confessional communities where one of the women who's been working hard, not just in that community for 4 or 5 years, but she's been doing work for 25 years on her story. And
her own suffering.
Of her own suffering, right. And yet it was one more, and has made, her growth has been geometric. And yet there was a moment in which, as I say, I always kind of thought that when people got older, like in their 80s and 90s, that they would just stop being a problem, right? And they're not. People can behave badly until right up until they're, and hers is a life in which her family, she has parents who are aged. They are not medically or cognitively impaired, and they find ways to continue to behave very badly and reenact and reactivate things that they've done to her since she was a kid. One day, she had another interaction with them, and she was so upset because she was responding to this. And it's like, why after 25 years is this still happening to me? And I noticed there was a crystallization in that moment, this is a woman who continues to suffer because she's doing the work. She could give into the system, but she doesn't. And in that moment, I thought, gosh, this book is about honoring suffering. The Christian story is the only story in the world that honors suffering. Eastern metaphysics will quickly want to have you acknowledge it, but pretend it's not really real.
Yeah, detach from it.
Western metaphysics will have you acknowledge it and see that it's only bad, and we need to do everything we can to get rid of it. It's the Christian story that acknowledges suffering as the natural response of the world to what we have done to God's good intention. And that we can't get rid of it, but that God is going to redeem it and even use it in as part of our redemption, because he's a God who's redeeming everything. And with this, we would say, we suffer for three reasons. We suffer because of things that have happened to us. We suffer mostly because of things that we do to ourselves. And we suffer thirdly, differently, because we are walking toward the light. That kind of a suffering differently is the suffering that is required when, Aslan is peeling the scales off of Eustace as he's been turned into a dragon. But it's layer after layer after layer. It's me giving up my addictions. It's me working to be more patient, which means, of course, I'm going to face situations in which I know that I'm not. All the things that there is a certain suffering about becoming more like Jesus. And what we really, the book is intended to recognize that it is in the crucible of suffering that the most durable hope that we can develop is formed. And hope is not a thing that just lands in our lap or that we hope that happens.
Yeah, that's just a wish.
It is a thing that we form, and we form it most durably in the context in which, as we suffer, I have those who are with me, present to me, and their presence necessarily transforms my experience of the pain and the story that I tell about it over the long haul.
So it sounds like you really connect up some of the confessional communities in your new book as you talk about this durability,
right?
This growth,
right?
That's happening.
Yeah, and I think again, we talk an awful lot about the feature of neuroplasticity. This idea that if we are persevering, these are Paul's words in Romans chapter 5, verse 3. That's what this book is about. It's a interpersonal neurobiological exploration of Romans 5, 1 through 5. And his movement from suffering to perseverance is important because it is in practicing perseverance, practicing in the presence of suffering, that we develop hope because of how our minds work as far as time is concerned. If I'm paying attention to something, I encode it, and that becomes the remembered thing that generates my anticipated future. That's why we remember our futures. And if I'm practicing allowing you to be present with me in the middle of suffering, in which I have the sense that I'm being loved, it not only transforms that moment, but as I encode more and more and more of those moments, it begins to shape what I anticipate my future will be when I imagine this, which is a transformational move on God's part, in which, as N.T. Wright likes to say, with Jesus, God's future has come forward into our present moment. What's most important about this, though, as far as I'm concerned, is what Paul writes about in the first two verses that precede this. And this has to do with this notion that we can only approach this suffering in this way if first we are really paying attention to secure attachment, which is what faith is about. And then he gets to this notion of glory. Glory means lots of different things in the entire biblical narrative, but a particular way, especially in John's gospel, that glory is appropriated is this notion that it's the glory of the Father and of the Son. This relationality, this sense that, like, my gosh, that Jesus is the ultimate object of God's pleasure. And as it turns out, so are we. Our traumas make it very difficult for us to have an embodied experience of that. It's hard to trust that. But it is in this space of sharing in God's glory, not just his brightness and his grandeur, but sharing in that relational sense that God comes in the room, he sees you, and he then wants to take you around and introduce you to everybody because he's so glad that you're in the room. This is where we begin to engage our suffering, because if I'm entering into a place of suffering with the sense that you guys are coming for me, that transforms everything about how I see life.
In a redemptive way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you're coming to find me, if you're coming to give me the opportunity to practice allowing you to love me, that makes all the difference. But it takes work.
Yeah, when you said that about persevering, I was thinking about the person that hides very well because they have had trauma or losses. And so they learn trust is a bad thing.
Yeah, right.
And how much difficulty it takes to create a new habit of when Gilbert moves toward me, instead of knee-jerking out and shutting down, of allowing that to happen. Almost like I don't have any skin and I'm letting him be the salve, but that hurts at the same time. But that is the work.
It is the work, and it's and like there isn't any other option.
There's no other option.
There's no other option. The sense of when you come toward me, you know, we like to say that, like, look, we're, our friends Jay and Catherine Wolf like to say, we all have disabilities. Some of them are more visible than others. We know that we're disabled when it comes to loving one another. One of our greatest disabilities, we're not very good at loving one, like look around. But a greater disability than that we have is our inability to allow ourselves to be loved. As much as we like with all of our pop music and pop culture, as much as we want to talk about how much I love being loved, the problem is that as soon as it gets here, it scares the living daylights out of me. And I'll love you as long as you don't ask me to be naked. I'll let you love me as long as I can just keep all my clothing on and you can only get so close.
Yeah, I love my persona.
Right. But the moment that you invite me to reveal the part of me that I hate the most, where there's going to be the risk that as soon as you see it, you're going to leave, I'm not really so down with that. And so this notion of being thin-skinned, when someone comes to love us and it's difficult to do that, it takes practice to do this. We're not asking people to eat the whole meal in one bite.
Yeah.
We're asking people to eat it one bite at a time. And you know, different people will move at different paces, which as a clinician is difficult too, because like how long are you going to take trying to convince someone to let you love them? This is, you know, we say this threshold that everybody has at which I'm willing to let you in the door. There's no way for us to predict what that's going to be like from person to person to person. I wish I could make that happen, but we just can't, yeah.
And when I'm thinking about some of this, it sounds like in the groups, right, the development, people all move at different speeds.
Sure.
And so that must be a challenge for the facilitators there to be able to balance all that.
Right, they do move at different speeds, but at the same time, I mean, each of those patients, if they're in individual work, they would be moving at different speeds. What happens in the group, though, is that the patient doesn't just have me. The patient has 7 or 8 other people that are certainly patient, but that are also coming for them. This gravitational pull of the mass effect of a relational group has the capacity. So if you've got one person demonstrating loving kindness in the room, that's a good thing. If I have 8 people in the room demonstrating loving kindness, I literally, in my physicality, am going to have a different physical response to this. And so if everybody's being patient, that gives me a very, very different experience of what it means for someone to be patient with me. More so than if it's just you being patient with me. And so in that sense, that gravitational pull is more likely to coax me into a space rather than I'm just working with one person, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, when you look at like developmentally, we're all born in families, and families is a bunch of people, for good or for bad. And then Jesus says, who are my mother and brother and sisters, for those who do the will of God? Oh, well now you're in a group called the church. It's where we grow, is
right.
in community. It's
right.
not, one-to-one is important, but having that multiplicity of personalities and styles and stories is so powerful.
Right, and you know, we're quick to point out that these are not binary methodologies. It's not like either or. There are plenty of people who are in our groups who once every other week, once a month, are continuing to meet with their individual therapists because there are things that they know they want to talk about in the group, but they're not ready to talk about. They're kind of like, I tell people it's kind of like getting to the pool in the summer and you've never gone off the high dive. And you have some kids who just go right off the high dive the very first day, and you have other kids who are sitting on their towel and they're looking at that thing, and then they may get up and walk over to the base of the ladder, and they just stand there and people are going by them. And you know how this works gradually. And you have some kid who's just goes off the board at the very end of the summer, and you say, gosh, you've taken a long time to go off the board. And he said, no, he's been working to go off the board the entire summer. It just happened all at once because he's had to develop the courage to do this. He's had to watch other people do this for a long enough period of time. Not everybody has to do that. But the more we have people who are able to take the risks, it really creates comfort and confidence for those people who have been waiting to share this thing now for the last 6 months, but I'm just waiting to gather up the courage. And sometimes it takes going back to talk to my therapist about why I'm afraid, what's going to happen, and so forth and so on.
Yeah, well, I'll have their full attention and I'll have to share it with the group around that.
This has been fascinating today as we've been learning all these different aspects about your new book and about these confessional communities. What we like to have a tip that we leave with today. What's a takeaway tip that you have for our listeners?
You know, I think one of the most important elements that courses through all of this work is that we are always in a moment of choice. Any encounter that we have, we're always going to be in a moment of choice in which we are going to encounter whatever it is, whether it's our parents, our siblings, our spouses, our workplace, ourselves. We are always going to be at this point of choosing, am I going to encounter this moment with curiosity or with condemnation? And we more often than not find ourselves in psychotherapists' offices because we've spent most of our lives approaching the moments of our lives with condemnation. We don't even know that this is what we're doing, rather than curiosity. And so I think one tip that I would have it would be an encouragement for you to begin to pay more attention to particular moments in your day and practice simply pausing and being curious about whether or not my posture right now is one of curiosity or my posture is one of condemnation. And to begin to practice choosing to go down the path of curiosity and not allow shame to do the kind of work that it typically does. I think that you'll see a difference in the course of your day, let alone the course of your week, month, your life.
Curt, that reminds me so much of all that neurobiological research about change, lasting change, and it always starts with a thing called focused attention, as you know. If you focus your attention on this moment, things happen. So
yeah, they do.
That was very helpful.
Yeah, they're happening whether we're aware of it or not.
The
question is, am I actually able to be a fully present agent in the moment that can choose curiosity and therefore be open to what the Spirit is doing, rather than choosing condemnation and be completely closed off to it and miss what God is trying to do in so many of those moments.
Thank you so much, Curt, for being here today. And Dr. Townsend, do you want to close us up with anything today?
Well, I just like to tell our listeners that a guy like Curt, when you read his books, and you got to read his new book, The Deepest Place, you got to take it in small bites, because he comes from such a level of training, spiritually as well as on a neurological level. Don't rush through the thing. I mean, he talked about not going too fast, and you'll get the rich mother lode of what his thinking is. And so it's just a blessing to have that in you as a source.
Thank you. Great to be with you guys.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you enjoy the Townsend Institute podcast series, head to our website at cui.edu/Townsend to find out more about the certificates, bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees offered through Concordia University, Irvine. With programs in mental health counseling, executive coaching and consulting, and organizational leadership, we have a variety of faith-based programs dedicated to helping you fulfill your academic and professional goals, all the while furthering your competence, character, and connection. Again, that's cui.edu/Townsend.